associated disorders. I'll be your organizer for this evening and would like to welcome you to our webinar on anxiety and its impact on sports, academics, and performance, understanding the mental and emotional side of performance. Thank you all for joining us. All participants are muted, so if you have a question, please type it in the bottom of your question box and click send, and you can post the question during the webinar, but Dr. Hartke will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. We will get to as many questions as time allows. In addition, tonight's presenter is available to take your questions on the Wednesday webinar discussion board. This discussion board will be monitored for the next 7 days. Feel free to look and post questions as often as you like. Answers will be archived for future reference. If you missed any part of the presentation or would just like to hear it again, an archived version will be posted to the website shortly. When you exit the webinar, there will be a brief exit survey that we would like you to fill out. The New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome and Associated Disorders, its directors and employees assume no responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, objectivity, or usefulness of the information presented on our site. We do not endorse any recommendation or opinion made by any member or physician, nor do we advocate for any treatment. You are responsible for your own medical decisions. Now, I'm going to turn over the introductions of our speaker to Martha Butterfield, the Program Coordinator of NJCTS. Marty?
Thanks, Kelly, and good evening, everyone. Before I begin my introduction of tonight's webinar presenter, I'd like to take a minute to call your attention to the slide on the screen that's promoting our Tim Howard raffle. For those of you who don't know who he is, Tim Howard is a soccer superstar. He's the goalie for England's Everton Football Club. Not only that, he's a great friend to our organization, a Jersey guy who also has Tourette syndrome, and he has generously agreed to let us raffle him off. The proceeds from the raffle will allow us to continue to offer a variety of programs for educators, families, and medical professionals that inform and educate, such as tonight's webinar on the psychology of academic and sport performance. When this webinar is over, please take a moment to log on to our website, www.njcts.org, and show your support for the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome by clicking on the Team Up with Tim Howard link. We'll be grateful if you would share this information with your soccer families, friends, colleagues. We recently experienced a 66% reduction in our funding. So this raffle is our biggest opportunity to raise funds and continue much-needed services for those affected by this neurological disorder. And with that, I'll now stop sounding like a public television announcement and introduce our presenter for the evening. Dr. Graham Hartke received his undergraduate degree from Rutgers University and his graduate degree from the Rutgers Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology with a doctorate in school psychology and a concentration in sports psychology. As a New Jersey Board of Psychological Examiners temporary permit holder, Dr. Hartke conducts cognitive behavioral therapy under the supervision of Dr. Kenneth Schneider, a Ph.D. of Springfield Psychological Associates in Springfield, New Jersey. Dr. Hartke is also a New Jersey certified school psychologist at Shepherd Schools in Morristown, New Jersey. And while at Rutgers, Dr. Hartke was a clinician in our TS practicum, working with children and families living with Tourette syndrome. He specializes in mental coaching for sport and performing arts, working with children and adolescents and adults, as well as in the treatment of a broad range of neurological disorders, including ADHD, OCD, ODD, Tourette syndrome, anxiety, behavioral management, as well as Asperger's syndrome and high-functioning autism. Dr. Hartke, we are pleased to have you join us tonight, and I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Marty and Kelly. I'd also like to thank Faith Rice and everyone at New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome for inviting me to present this webinar. I'd also like to welcome everybody that's joining us tonight, and thank you for joining us. So let's proceed with the presentation. Tonight's talk is going to be on anxiety and its impact on sports, academics, and performance. And really, it's going to focus on understanding and developing the mental and emotional side of performance. Here's some of my information, which Marty already discussed with you. So what I wanted to start off with was just give you an outline of the presentation. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is going over some basic goals of the presentation. Then I'll give you an overview of performance psychology. It's a pretty broad field, so I'll try to narrow it down in the short time we have. Then I'm going to cover some common areas of difficulty in performance psychology. And fourth, I'm going to target specifically performance anxiety as a common area of difficulty. Next, I'm going to go over some take-home strategies. So what I wanted to end with was to give you, everyone joining us tonight, some just general take-home strategies. I'm not going to go into great depth on any strategies because of the time we have, but I think it's important to give you some strategies you can try. And last, I will give you some resources if you would like to follow up on any of these areas or learn more about performance psychology, or more specifically performance anxiety or performance enhancement. And finally, we'll take some questions. Okay, so the goals of the presentation are pretty straightforward. The presentation is to give you an overview of performance psychology and some general strategies to help with performance anxiety and performance enhancement, just to give you some knowledge of performance psychology. So let's start off with an overview of performance psychology. Performance psychology is a pretty young field comparatively to other areas of psychology, but it's a branch of research and applied psychology concerned with the mental and emotional side of performance. And if you look at the bottom of this slide here, where I have my mouse, really what performance psychology is in the performance triangle. We consider physical aspects of performance, technical and fundamental aspects of performance, the actual skills you need to learn to perform. For instance, in baseball, how to swing a bat the right way. In music, how to play the instrument the right way. In school, how to complete math problems. That would be technical and fundamental skills. Performance psychology is concerned mostly, but it also includes the other areas, but with the mental aspect of this triangle. Areas that performance psychology covers are wide, but really, if you narrow it down, there's a branch that really is concerned with performance enhancement, so improving someone's performance, so working with top performers or even with youth performers and improving their performance to reach peak performance. It also works at different levels. Individual, it can work with a whole team. It can go over and really just focus specifically on performance anxiety, or in some performance areas like dance or sports, performance psychology can really concern itself with injury prevention. The other aspects of performance psychology, I brought this up already, but in more depth, is that we're talking about all areas of performance here. This talk is pretty broad in scope, but all areas of what's considered performing, including the ones that might come to mind right away: performing arts, music, dance, singing, acting, sports, and other competitive activities. And there's many activities included here. I did not list them all, so if I missed your activity, I apologize. But everything from professional, well-known sports in America, like baseball, football, all the way to any kind of competitive activity, like a pageant or some kind of card tournament or chess tournament. The other area of performance, which might not register as obviously as a performance area, is academic performance. And specifically in this talk, I'm going to talk about test taking and those kind of areas where in the moment you need to perform an academic task. And also, performance areas really can focus on work and business. And I just put other there in case I missed an area that someone, that's their area of performance. And work and business is actually a really big area of performance psychology. A lot of organizational psychologists work in this area and work with stockbrokers or other individuals in business that need to, be in the moment and really perform successfully in their jobs. The other area I just want to point out is that we're looking at performance at all levels of age, skills, ability. So children, adolescents, adults, ability levels from recreational, youth, interscholastic, collegiate, semi-professional, professional. It goes through all levels of school. And being that this is a talk for the New Jersey Center for Tourette Syndrome, I thought I would just highlight some performance you might have heard of that have Tourette Syndrome. And we'll be talking a little bit about challenges that some individuals with Tourette Syndrome might have as well with performance. But Tim Howard, which Marty just spoke about, is one of the top goalies in soccer in the world, plays for the USA team and plays in England. A lot of people have been watching James Durbin on American Idol, who's a singer. And many people might not know this, but it's thought that Mozart, the famous composer, also had Tourette syndrome. Okay, if you take anything else from this talk, this is probably one of the most important slides about performance psychology. I title the fundamentals of performance psychology. But the focus in performance psychology is on what you can control, and it's not on what you can't control. So one of the big areas when you talk about mental skills is adjusting your thinking process when you're performing and focusing on thoughts and behaviors that you can control. So an example would be giving your best effort. So you're going to take a test, give your best effort. Or if you're a singer, go on stage and sing as best as you can in the moment. The focus, really, what you try to get away from is focusing on what you can't control, your outcomes. So saying that your goal or your main focus, what you want to worry about, and this is what a lot of people worry about with performance anxiety, are the outcomes, things they can't control, such as how an audience is going to react to them or what a judge is going to decide. So the focus really has to be on what you can control and not on what you can't control. Also, on the bottom here, I have Charlie Marr's developmental levels of performers. This is a framework that is fundamental in looking at performance psychology, and actually all areas of psychology you can use this framework, but specifically in performance psychology. Charlie Marr is a professional sports psychologist who works in New Jersey, also in other states and with many professional teams. And this is the model he uses with a lot of professional and also youth performers, the whole range I discussed before. So the first one I want to highlight in the bottom before we move on is the developmental levels of a performer. So looking at the whole person, not just the moment when they're on stage performing. So the first level is performer as a person. You can see where my mouse is on the bottom. The second level is performer as a coper. The third level is performer as a teammate or a group member. And the fourth level is as a performer. Okay? So I'm going to go into those in a little more depth in a few minutes. Okay, on this slide, another key area of performance psychology is really looking at the process of how these skills are developed. And really, what it comes down to is putting in little plans, or they could be large plans if you're working with a whole team or organization. The first step is assessment and education. So you need to assess what the problem is and what areas you need to target for intervention. And I put education there because you need to educate yourself about these areas. And really what it comes down to is here, learning about your strengths and areas needing improvement. The second component is the plan. So once you develop and you figure out which areas you want to target, it's coming up with a plan to work on those needs. So you have to develop goals that you can control. Like I said before, focus on what you can control, which we call process goals. So a controllable process goal would be something like, I'm going to practice my guitar for 30 minutes a day. That's something you can control. An uncontrollable goal would be that you would work towards is, I'm going to get a standing ovation. Now, getting a standing ovation is an outcome. You can't force everyone in the audience to stand up, but you can control your behavior and try to practice every day, and maybe that will lead to a standing ovation. So we're going to go over some strategies for developing goals later on in the talk, but that's the second part. The third part is implementing the plan. So when you set your goals, is actually implement them. So if you're going to practice, then practice. If you're going to study, study. And a key here is when you implement your plan, is set up some way to monitor that you're actually working towards those goals. And the last step is evaluate the plan. Similar to monitoring your plan, but you need to set up some kind of checkpoints or a method to make sure that you're working towards your goal. In sports, this happens a lot. You'll see a lot of athletes in their training. They'll have charts. They'll make some kind of spreadsheet where they keep track of how much they train, and they'll increase their training as time goes on. Similar strategies can be implemented with study habits as well as musical performance or other performance as well. Now this might seem pretty straightforward, but a lot of performance psychology strategies and frameworks are meant to be pretty straightforward, so they're accessible and easy to use and grasp. Okay, so now I'm going to go over common areas of difficulty, and I broke this down by the developmental levels of performer. So I'm going to go into a little bit of this. So when we talk about a performer as a person, we really talk about what's their vision, where do they want to go in their performance career, in their life, and also what are their values, what do they value? Do you value performance? Where do you want to go with that in the future? Those are some questions you might ask. And also what your goals are. So some problems people might have in this level of development is they don't have a clear vision or goal what they want to accomplish. And often, sometimes you'll have a parent and child who have very differing views. You could have a parent who is gung-ho about their child being the next pro football player, star from New Jersey. But the child, they go to football practice and they're into it, but they're not at the same level as their parent of knowing where to be. It could be vice versa as well. The other question you want to ask is, it might sound obvious, but why do you want to perform? A lot of individuals are in situations where they've just been performing for so many years that they don't even really stop to ask this question. And I also have down here another area of difficulty is really balancing performance activities with other life demands. If they're very out of balance, that can cause many problems. So before someone even gets on a stage, gets in the classroom, ready to take a test, gets on a field to play a sport, you want to really check that they have their goals, they have their visions, and they have some kind of perspective and balance in their life, and check those areas out. If someone is practicing their sport for 10 hours after school and they're up really late, every night, and they don't have time to do their homework, then the homework's going to suffer. So that can really affect other areas of their performance. So that's why looking and considering the balancing performance is a major area. All right, the second part is performer as a coper. This is the area that you see a lot on TV if you watch ESPN or other sporting channels about athletes that make poor decisions. They go out, they go to clubs, they go to places, they're with people, places, and things that they shouldn't be around that are bad influences. At all levels of performer and in all areas of performance, there are what we call red flags, people, places, and things that are risks, distractions, and bad influences that can derail you from your goals. For individuals with Tourette syndrome, coping with tics can be a distraction, obsessions and compulsions, other associated disorders. These are all part of the performer as a coper, is coping with whatever is in your way from performance. The other area is sometimes people, when you look at them as a coper, there's not enough supports in their life, what we would call green flags, people, places, or things that could help you along the way in performance. Okay, so I'm going to move along. Now, performer as a teammate or group member. This comes down to how someone communicates with others, they know their roles, the responsibilities and the relationships they have within a group, and it really, a lot of people run into trouble with how they work with a group. So they might have their whole life and their vision in line as a person. They might not have any risks that they're coping with. They might be an excellent performer, but they can't get along with their team. And people that they work with do not like working with them. And that could be the area of difficulty that really needs to be targeted. And the last area is performer as a performer. And I put common areas of difficulty. The first one I put there is performance anxiety, which we're going to get into in a minute. So I'm not going to talk about that right now. But really, when you look at performer as a performer, you have to consider the before, during, and after. I have them highlighted here, before, or underlined, before, during, and after. And if you look at each of these stages, you can find areas of difficulty and areas that you need to focus on. A lot of times before the performance, someone might have a lack of preparation. They might not have studied enough, they might not have practiced enough. That could be a common area. There are other areas as well. This is a common area I pointed out here. During a performance, someone might have difficulty with focusing, concentrating, and even just having a sustained effort during a performance. There might be distracted thoughts, there might be tics occurring, a lot of anxiety that can really, cause your concentration to wax and wane during a performance. And then after performance, after performance is really focused on how someone evaluates performance, and people run into difficulty here when they give themselves really negative, harsh self-evaluations after performance. So after they perform, they only focus on negative comments, they only focus on negative feedback, they don't focus on positive, and there's really also a lack of a plan often for how to take feedback or looking at a performance, using that information and making it into a positive and developing a plan to grow and learn from mistakes. Okay, so now I want to talk a little about performance anxiety, which is a topic that everyone in the world, I would assume, has experienced at some point in their life. Anxiety is a normal reaction to stressful situations. It's normal. You've probably heard this before, but it's part of the flight or fight response. And what it does is it gets our body ready to perform. And it could be ready to fight or run away in a situation where danger is present. Or it could just be, it could help get our body to an arousal level that will give us an optimal performance. The key question is not that someone has anxiety during performance. It's really how much anxiety you're having. Is it a little discomfort, or you just, you have a little bit of butterflies before you get on stage or before you take a test, or you're just a little bit more energized the morning, before you go into work, before a big business meeting? Or is it to the point where you're in a complete state of panic and you cannot function? So really the big question is how much anxiety you're experiencing. How it affects performance, really it can be broken down into physical, cognitive, and behavioral areas. Physical reactions, and these are natural reactions to anxiety that get our body ready for performance. Sweating, heart racing, blurred vision. You can have a sense of detachment from reality. Thoughts can really be distracting during performance. You can worry, have a lot of fear. Many people have trouble remembering during a performance. So you might, that's where someone would clam up in the middle of a talk or middle of a singing performance or an acting, forget their lines. Or during a test, they're so anxious they cannot think of the right answer. Okay? So on the last one is looking at how it affects behaviors. Anxiety causes avoidance, escape, withdrawal, and safety seeking. For individuals with OCD, it can cause rituals. And the rituals are basically a type of avoidance. They help relieve some of the anxiety. Now, how anxiety affects performance. This is the Yerkes-Dodson law. These are two psychologists who developed this back in the early 20th century. But this is a general chart for how performance affects anxiety. If you look over here at this graph, you can see on the bottom here I have level of arousal, and over here I have quality of performance. The Yerkes-Dodson law is basically says the relation between arousal and performance is an inverted U. So if you have really low anxiety or arousal, the quality of performance will be lower. If you have really, really high arousal or anxiety, your performance will be low. The optimal level is up here. There's an optimal level where you have the right amount of anxiety, which will cause the right amount of performance. Now, this relationship looks great on this chart with a perfect inverted U, but really, it really depends on what the task is and how familiar you are with doing that task or performance and what type of task it is. So, if someone's getting ready for a sprinting track race, they would want to have a higher level of arousal than someone who's getting ready to sit down and take an SAT. But the key here is that for each type of performance, there's an optimal level of arousal. You don't want to be completely flat where you're during a performance, or you're almost falling asleep, or you have no anxiety. But you also don't want to be extremely anxious. So it really depends on the task. Also, how familiar you are with the task. If you really know something well, you could tolerate higher levels of anxiety to get a more quality performance. If you don't know the task well, lower levels of anxiety are better to give you a higher quality performance. Okay, and this is an interesting slide from Wilson, who does research in music psychology. He just points out he has described it this way, but sources of performance anxiety that someone might have. This is where it's coming from. First, he notes that it could be coming from the person. So someone might have a predisposition. It could be genetic, could be related to past experiences to anxiety. And included with that is an unrealistic thinking pattern and a sense of wanting to be perfect and other cognitive distortions that someone might have. So someone might just be anxious in general in most areas of their life, and they're bringing that to a performance. In some performance professions, such as music, research has shown that musicians actually have, as a whole, are a little bit more anxious of a group than in other professions. So in some groups, it can occur more, and they're bringing anxiety to the plate, let's say. Also, looking at source anxiety, this is pretty straightforward and obvious to a lot of people, but sometimes when you're in the moment, you don't realize how much situational stress and circumstances are causing anxiety. If you have a lot of hardships in your life and you have to do a performance and you're feeling extra anxious about it, it could be related to the whole situation that's going on. And also the task at hand. Like I said before, the level of difficulty can affect how much anxiety you have. Down here, I bring up the word optimal performance and the idea of flow. Now, flow is generally considered in performance psychology the optimal time when you're performing, where everything just happens. It's a easy performance. Many people have experienced before where they have, in sports, they just had an amazing game, let's say in football or baseball or tennis. One day, just everything worked together. They played really well, and they didn't even think about it. Musicians can have flow, actors, students, everybody. But really, it all depends, if you have this flow, on the balance between how challenging the task is and how skilled the performer is. So if you look on the bottom here, you have task challenge level. So if a task challenge is really easy and the performer is really skilled, so if you have a master, let's say, guitar player, and they're playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, they're going to be bored. If you have a beginner guitar player and they're playing something from Mozart, they're going to have high anxiety. So I mean, I use the extremes to show, but really to get the flow, really try to have some kind of optimal anxiety. So the take home here is that anxiety actually can be helpful for performance, but you need to harness it and get the right amount. I'm going to just go through this slide really quickly. Physical symptoms people have when they have anxiety. People will tend to notice the physical symptoms of anxiety that relate to their performance. So there are a general set of physiological symptoms that anybody experiences during anxious situations: sweaty hands, shortness of breath, heart racing. But performers will typically notice the areas related to body parts in your performance. So a golfer might notice their sweaty hands more than anything else. Or a singer might notice shortness of breath, because that's the area that they focus on for their performance. For cognitive symptoms, just some areas how it affects anxiety, a lot of negative thoughts can happen during performance and really can cause anxiety to skyrocket during a performance if you start thinking, this is the worst, I'm never going to get through this, any kind of negative thoughts. Can it disrupt attention and cause you to miss lines? I went over that earlier, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. And also behavioral symptoms. This might be very obvious to sports fans when they see how anxiety for behavioral symptoms can change how performers go about performing. You will see someone who has done an activity hundreds and thousands of times perfectly, but when it comes down to the clutch moment in the World Series or the Super Bowl or the championship, they choke. You might see a pitcher that can't get the ball over the plate. And even on a smaller scale, a batter, let's say a youth baseball player, might be a little bit nervous during a game and might be swinging the bat perfectly during practice. But when it comes to the game, his swing completely changes because he's starting to tense up. Or another example from baseball is someone who's fielding like a shortstop. But in practice, they might not be anxious. The baseball might be hit to them. They might feel the grounder. But during the game, they lift their glove up when the ball comes to them because they're so tense and anxious, and they want to avoid getting hit by the ball, or they're just thinking too much about it. So now I'm going to spend the last part of this talk on some take-home strategies. So here, and basically this is not an exhaustive list by any means. I just wanted to put a few strategies up here that you could take home and try. And if they work for you, you're interested, there are many more resources out there to expand on these. So I'm going to go over strategies for assessing strengths and areas needing improvement, setting goals, performance anxiety, focus and concentration during performance, and student test anxiety. Okay, this is one of the key charts you can use for assessing strengths and areas needing improvement. This has, on the left column, developmental levels of performer. These are all of Charlie Marr's levels of a performer. And this chart seems pretty straightforward, but I challenge anybody to copy this chart. You can write it on a piece of paper or print out this slide, and seriously consider your strengths and areas you need to improve in these 4 areas. And you will quickly see the areas that you need to work on and areas that you're doing well in. As a person, I just put you can kind of list your goals, in self-care. You might say, okay, areas of improvement, I need to write some goals. I have no idea really what my goals are. For a lot of individuals out there who try to start fitness plans, they might not have really clear goals. They might say, well, I kind of want to just get in shape or lose weight. We're really identifying process goals. So how are you going to get to your destination? Your goals would be, I'm going to run every day for 20 minutes. That could be one of your goals. Down here for where I have as a coper, this is where I want you to write your green flags and your red flags. So your green flags are supports that help protect against any risks and challenges. So these are people, places, and things that can help you out and support you. Over here are risks and challenges that could throw you off your performance track, so where you want to go. This is a key area for needing improvement, and a lot of people that work in performance psychology, you can focus many, many weeks and years on improving this area. So staying with the right crowd, eating better, any kind of risk and challenge that throw you off track. And the other areas as well, you can include strengths and areas needing improvement for yourself as a group member and as a performer. Now, as a performer, it's good to break it down to before, during, and after a performance, and really look at before a performance how well you prepare for a performance, how well you have everything set in place, that you have some kind of balance and perspective in your life. During a performance, focus on the areas that you're strong in. So are you able to keep focused? Are you able to follow through in your performance and get through it without having an anxiety attack? That might be one of your areas you need to improve on, is staying relaxed on your performance. After performance, really would focus on, at the bottom here, looking at how you evaluate after performance. So how you deal with looking at your performance and moving on from there and improving from there, listening to feedback and moving from there. Okay, this strategy is setting process goals. This is pretty straightforward as far as you don't need to write an exhaustive list of goals, and actually it's probably better if you write a few goals to start, maybe even 1 or 2, and see how well you can stay on top of them. So the focus here is to set goals that are process goals. So for this activity, what you could do is write a list of 2 or 3 process goals. For each goal, develop an activity you can actually do to reach that goal. So if you look on the bottom here, I have example, goal, activity, and check. For this, you might be really simple and write, for my goal, I want to practice guitar 3 nights a week, or I'm going to study from my SAT book, 2 nights a week. For the activity, it's where you want to be very specific about exactly how you're going to do it. So you're going to play, for guitar, I put play the Mel Bay guitar book, which is a beginner guitar book, for 30 minutes. and I put a specific time. You can get that specific to make sure you stay on top of your goal. And then I put check there. You have goal, activity, and check. Have some kind of way to check off your process. So check off that you did the activity. This simple activity, it sounds pretty easy, but it actually can be challenging to stay on top of it. But imagine if you practiced, you did practice 3 nights a week for 30 minutes, and you had the chart to show you made your progress. You would be focusing on what you can control to meet your goals. Up here I did put, stay away from outcome goals and vague goals that have less control, that you have less control of. So instead of putting, so you're working with a whole team, instead of saying your goal is, I want to just win the championship, or if you have a vague goal, like I want to be the best I can be, try to focus on what you can control. It's not to say that outcome goals, saying as a team we want to win the championship, are not good goals to have. But as far as developing mental and emotional skills, if you want to work on those skills, it's important to set process goals because you can control those. Okay, here's some strategies for performance anxiety. The first area I would recommend for this is to ask some questions. You want to assess the nature and severity of the anxiety. You want to see how bad it is, and you want to see and really get an idea of what's going on with it. So all the questions on this sheet you want to just kind of go through and ask. What I would really want to know, especially, is where and when does it occur? For some people who would initially claim they have performance anxiety, when you talk to them, you realize that they have anxiety all the time about many areas of their life. So it's not just during performance. Or for other people, it's the opposite of that, where, they have performance anxiety, but that's it. They're not really anxious people except for that time. The other questions you want to ask are, how long does it last? How often does it occur? And it's very important to ask yourself, is it helpful for performance? Because as I pointed out before, it is helpful to have the optimal level of anxiety to get the highest performance. And you want to really look at how you've coped with it thus far. Because you might already have some strategies that are helpful. They might not be helpful. They might be a hindrance to your performance, running off the stage. You good? Okay. So the strategies I've listed here, I'm not going to go into great detail on them. And some of them you might have used before. But I basically wanted to bring up some basic relaxation strategies, deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, which could be helpful in performance situations. Now, these are good for mild and moderate performance anxiety. If you're having a panic attack, deep breathing is not going to solve your whole problem, but it can really help calm you down. But really, in a performance, doing some relaxation strategies can be very beneficial to you. So on here I listed some strategies. One is the breathe in for 5, hold for 2, and breathe out for 5 seconds. And on the bottom I have a meditative version where you breathe in, and each breath you count the number up to 10 for each breath in, and then for each breath out you count down on the even numbers. This strategy can be very beneficial for many people. In one instance when I was working with a track team, a bunch of the runners that I worked with used relaxation strategies before the races. They were having some anxiety. It was more, I would say, in the mild to moderate range, some of them more than others. But what they would do is, as a group, they would sit down they had relaxation music, or even in some cases they downloaded a relaxation script on their iPods, and they sat down as a group and they listened to that and kind of relaxed, brought themselves down a little bit in anxiety before the race. They claimed that it was very helpful for them in that situation, and I've seen it used many times, by athletes and performers in those situations. And also, progressive muscle relaxation is another technique which involves tensing and relaxing different muscle groups throughout the body. Generally, you go up from the toes all the way up through your head by tensing for maybe about 5 seconds to 10 seconds, as tense as possible, and then releasing the tension all the way up through your toes, legs, stomach, back. In this case also, there are scripts that you can download on CD or MP3 that you can listen to that can guide you through this situation. Progressive muscle relaxation actually can be very helpful for some people when they're performing because they can tense and relax muscles while they're breathing, and a combination down here with deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. But they can do it while they're performing, and no one can really know it if they tense muscles that no one could see. So a musician can focus on their feet. If they're sitting down in an orchestra, they could tense and relax muscles in their feet, you know, in areas such as that. On the bottom here, there are some, like I said, there's some CDs that combine deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and visualization. So visualizing relaxing scenes such as a beach or a countryside, or in some cases, visualizing a successful performance could be helpful. Basically, when you can't really talk about anxiety and strategy for anxiety without talking about exposure, because in any anxiety treatment, as if you listen to other webinars, I'm sure you've heard other presenters talk about this, tackling anxiety really, or in general, you need to expose yourself to the situation. And performance anxiety is no different. You could do these exposures on your own, and what a lot of people do is, as you know, they just keep performing and they get more used to the different situations with exposure. Generally speaking, the more you perform, the more comfortable one becomes. It's not always the case. Some people's anxiety are more extreme than others, and they might need professional help with this. But I have down here just a list of the 3 Ps, which are 3 areas you can use to kind of help prepare for performance, including some exposure. So the first P is prepare. So practice and study and train in an organized manner. And I put focus on self-care, which is key, because you want to make sure that you're balanced, you're eating right, you're sleeping right, you're taking care of any physical, mental, and emotional demands you have outside of performance. And down here, the second P is practice the performance. And this is key, practicing it in a realistic situation. Now, there's a sense of adrenaline that comes in any performance when you're actually in the real performance that just isn't really captured in a dress rehearsal or a practice test. But the more you can, the more closely you can get to the real situation, the better for the exposure. You could do it gradually. You know, if you're a singer, you can practice singing in front of a mirror. You can practice singing in front of your parents, then kind of a group of 5 people and increase it. You could do imaginary exposure, where while you're performing, you're imagining what it's like to be in the situation and in vivo. And at the end, I put perspective, because I'm always concerned about after a performance with someone, how someone evaluates performance, because this can really add on to performance anxiety. But to review your process and your goals, use positive self-evaluation statements, and really giving yourself credit. People tend to really dwell on the negative after performance, and this will really fuel performance anxiety and worrying about the next time they're going to perform. So having some kind of strategies and ways to really review your performance by just focusing on the positives and the objectives, what actually happened. And even make a list of positives of the performance and negatives of performance. So you could see maybe there's many more positives than the negatives on that list. But if there's one negative, I guarantee that person is thinking about one negative compared to 20 positives. So it's important to really remember the 3 Ps. Other strategies, I'm just going to bring up real quick. Obviously, I can't cover everything in this short webinar, but there's some key areas that are not covered here, but general stress management and exercise can be very helpful. Cognitive strategy as well, like cognitive restructuring, thought challenging, and you know, recording automatic thoughts and thoughts pop in your head can be really key for working on anxiety. There's many resources out there. If you go on Google or Amazon, you type performance anxiety, you will find books, you'll find websites, you'll find help, self-help website books. But if your anxiety is severe enough and really hindering your performance, or you just like to work, there are many excellent professionals out there who treat anxiety disorders. So I'd recommend, you know, looking into cognitive behavioral therapy, and you could also talk to your physician or your psychiatrist about medication options, which I'm not going to go into in this talk. Okay, lastly, I just wanted to get, have about a minute or two, so I'm going to just go through this really quick. One strategy for performing that I want to bring up. So this is a way to help focus during a performance. Now, this isn't just a performance anxiety. This can be used in any situation. But really what it involves is coming up with a key word, and also combining that with some imagery of you performing the performance as best as you can in the right way. So the idea is that you come up with some kind of short keyword or keywords. It could be something like focus or keep your mind, keep your mind set. It could be a bunch of words, or usually it's better if you only have 1 or 2 words. That when you say the word, it's a key for you to focus and keep your thoughts at bay during that moment. And it's really key to practice using these keywords. So while a good example is a baseball pitcher. If you're practicing or you're in a game and you're throwing your pitches and you're starting to notice your mind wander a little bit, and you remind yourself of, you say your keyword. Your keyword might be focus now, or keywords will be focus now. And that will, when you say focus now, you have an image of yourself taking a deep breath, relaxing, and throwing a strike. Now this simple technique can be very helpful to help somebody in the moment just lock in and try to focus on the task at hand. A singer might have the same, use a similar strategy to remind themselves to focus right before they start singing to remember the lines. If someone's on stage might be distracted by someone in the audience. Someone with Tourette syndrome or tics might be distracted by the tics and obsessions of OCD, and having a keyword can be helpful. Last but not least, I have 2 slides on test anxiety. For test anxiety, it's key to make sure that the students, for those of you who work in schools and parents, have the appropriate combinations as far as relieving test anxiety. Also, students with Tourette's might need extra time. They might help writing. Handwriting could be a problem. Taking extra breaks. The other area for test anxiety is making sure the testing environment is calm. Kids pick up on teachers and parents on how they are, how they're feeling. They will completely absorb it. If teachers and parents are stressed, students will pick up on it. So all those teachers out there who are giving the NJ Ask or the HESPA test and are on edge, try to be as calm as possible because it'll help calm your students down. Parents can get on, talk to teachers. If students need accommodations, make sure they're on the same page with how they're preparing the student for the test and what they're doing during the test. And it goes without saying that you need to study and practice material so that you can meet that optimal level of anxiety and performance quality. So you're prepared and you can meet the challenge. Last but not least, I wanted to point out that I brought up the fundamentals of performance psychology is to focus on what you can control. So during a test, before, during, and after a test, focus on what you can control only. So before a test, don't think about what's going to happen if you don't pass the test. Focus on what you're doing to the process goals. So preparing and studying, getting ready for the test. During a test, your focus should be on what you can control. You can't control the outcome right now. You just need to focus on in the moment and giving your best effort. What you can do right there, what you can actually control, giving your best effort. After a test, like I brought up before about the evaluations, is focusing on the positives and ways to improve. Not dwelling on the negative. And last but not least, teach the students to use the accommodations that are provided if they have them. A lot of times students have accommodations. They might not ask for them as often as they should. But if they have tics, tell them these are accommodations. Make sure you use them and you can get them, especially for older students and even students in college who have accommodations. And the last thing on here is to try to decrease the pressure on the student to get a perfect score or do perfect. This is any area of performance. Kids have a lot of pressure on these days to be perfect, and it can really add to a lot of stress, test anxiety. So you want to set realistic goals and focus on the areas that they can control. And so when a kid goes into a test, it would be better to tell them, I want you to focus on giving your best effort. Do the best you can today. You studied hard. You did that. Now I just want you to work and do the best you can. The other things that you can do are practice and use relaxation techniques during the test. Okay, I know I've gone a little bit long, but here are some resources that can help with performance psychology or in general. You could try to, if you're interested in seeing what your areas of strengths and weaknesses are, besides using the strategies I've provided here, you can give yourself a mental skills assessment or do a mental skills inventory. There's a bunch of them online. If you Google, people have them on websites. You could try this one I have here at AS&K Sports. And also, there's a bunch of books here, different areas For those of you who work in schools, Merrill has a really good workbook for students with depression and anxiety that can have some practical strategies. There's books here for performing artists, for performance anxiety, but you can look into that. Now I guess I will take some questions.
All right, Dr. Hartke, thank you. Great presentation. Got a number of questions here, and since you just finished up with focus strategies, I have a question about that I'm hoping you will just touch on a little bit. Are there any specific strategies that you could mention for dealing with OCD-related procrastination, for example?
OCD-related procrastination. Well, if someone is procrastinating with OCD, it's hard to give a general answer with that. We would have to really see what the nature of the OCD is and what the rituals are, what the compulsions, and what kind of obsessions are underlying that. You know, why are they procrastinating? Someone with OCD might be procrastinating because their rituals are just taking too much time to perform, that they don't have time to, you know, perform the task, and it looks like they're procrastinating. Others might just have some kind of ritual around the performance anxiety, and that's related to it. So it really, I would kind of need more specifics to address that question.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Would you expand a little more on the parental role in establishing those process goals? Like, how much does a parent need to be involved in that?
Sure. Well, it depends on the age of the child and really the situation and how involved the parent is in the child's development. You know, if a parent, I think in a general level, it'd be beneficial for anybody if a parent to provide this information to their child. If it's a youth, you know, performer or a high school level, you know, say, look, let's come up with some basic goals that we want to work towards. For a young child, the parent may want to kind of develop the goals for the child and help work on them. So we know we're going to set these goals for studying, you know, every night for 30 minutes. You know, and work together. Basically, you're setting the goals. For an older child, you know, you got to give them a little more ownership of the goals, and I think it would be beneficial for anybody to talk to their teen athlete or older child about these goals and say, look, here's some, you know, I think that getting involved in the process can be very beneficial, and for younger children, more, you know, parents could have more of a, you know, direct impact.
Okay.
Okay.
Discuss a little bit the strategies for how to handle situations where a child is enthusiastic about something, whether it's, you know, playing the piano or playing, you know, Little League, and then it fades, you know, and where does a parent need to step in and encourage and push, and when should the parent just back off?
That's an excellent question, because that occurs all the time.
It's like dieting, you know, we all get excited about that too.
Well, I think a parent needs to take a step back. The first thing is if you notice that your child was very enthusiastic about a performing activity, say music or sports, you know, and then you know, a lot of parents will really encourage that and help the child out. It can be a big part of their lives, and then the child kind of fades in their interest. That's a sign to parents that maybe at the very least just why don't they talk to their child about it? So a lot of times children might, you know, they might be worried to even bring it up because they know their parents really are invested in it, and you know, they don't want to upset them. But I think as a parent, it could be extremely helpful if they start noticing that, to just talk to their child about what they think about, you know, performing, what they think about getting up every morning at 5:30 to go to you know, certain practices or dance lessons, or, you know, there's kids are involved in many activities. And a lot of times parents and kids are just on the go all the time doing these activities, that just taking a step back. If you notice your kids resisting a little bit, it's a sign that maybe you should check in with them. You know, you want to put their, you know, social, emotional well-being at the forefront.
Sure.
You know, and be realistic about goals with your children as well.
Okay. That's a great segue, because we also had another question about competition with kids. there's so much of that. And this questioner would appreciate your comments on what looks like excessive pressure on kids, that, and what the parental problems are around that, because it seems like there's a lot of pressure on kids to do sport, particularly.
Like, it's very, oh, the screen just went out. So the question, it's Marty, can you just rephrase that again? She
Sure.
wants to know what the parental role is for that?
Well, there's so much competition for kids these days. So this question that would appreciate your comments on what looks like excessive pressure on kids, and what the, what the potential problems are about that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Marty. Well, excessive pressure on kids can cause a great deal of stress, and often is a source of a lot of anxiety disorders in general, generalized anxiety disorder, especially performance anxiety, a lot of high-achieving students. If you talk to a lot of students who are either gifted students or students in performing arts, a lot of times are pretty gifted. They're under a lot of pressure, and a lot of times that gets pushed to the side with performance and competition. Now the key thing there is the word competition. There's a difference between just being engaged in the activities and competing. So competing academically can cause a lot of stress. Competing in sports can as well. But really, just need to take the hallmark here is really to take a realistic look at what you think your kid can realistically do. You definitely want to have goals, and you want to have a positive outlook, and you want to push your child to achieve. But if you know your child's not going to be the next Tiger Woods, and they're telling you they don't want to compete anymore, and that's a sign that maybe you could take another avenue with them. So the excessive pressure in itself does cause a lot of mental health challenges for children, and parents just need to be aware of that and try to get them to do activities that reduce stress. Try to get some fun in their lives at times. I mean, there's a point with many kids who are involved in so much competition where they're not really having fun anymore. They're driving 10 hours a weekend to soccer tournaments in other states, and at first it might be really fun, but as they get older, maybe they change their minds. So the big thing is for parents to be aware of this and take action on it, because it can really cause a lot of stress for students. It can start affecting all areas of performance, so school performance. And I know I'm talking generally, but they're just general questions.
No, I agree with you, and I think it's sometimes something that gets overlooked in the process. Question about a 14-year-old son is very hard on himself when he doesn't do well. Can you discuss some techniques for dealing with those harsh self-evaluations, and when do those harsh evaluations become a concern for parents?
That's a good point. Sure. The first thing I would do, as a general strategy, is to have some kind of way to evaluate the performance for the child that's really objective. That doesn't include, what did you do in performance, and have the child look at that. So you could even write on a piece of paper all the positives that happen in the performance and what happened. So let's say in sports, I played for 45 minutes in the basketball game, and I made 2 baskets, not writing that you missed 3 baskets, but all the positives, and focusing on the areas that you can control. It's easier said than done, but really the more the people around the child can support looking at dealing with the aftermath of the performance in a positive way, it's more likely that the child will as well. This can be tough too. Some people with OCD could have a real big problem with harsh evaluations and after performance evaluations. It could be losing could be really there could be a lot of trouble around that, and getting really being really hard on themselves too. But really, I would say start with coming up with some way to write down after performance all the positives that happen, and just talk about the objective areas, and get what would also be beneficial if it's really severe. I would recommend going to some kind of cognitive behavioral therapist who would help with working on some of the negative thoughts, the the child is having, because there are strategies that can help that are I can't go into right now in full detail, but involve really challenging the thoughts, looking at the different thoughts, and it definitely takes work if it's severe to really work on that.
Yeah. It seems to me that kids often say, well, you're my mom, so, you're going to say that it was good anyway. And would it be helpful to, have someone, attend these things where possible who's not the mom or the dad, or, a friend who the kid might trust as being a little bit more objective? Is that something that would be useful to try?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's an excellent point. If there's a coach or some kind of a lot of kids, especially as they get into adolescence, they don't like listening to their parents, and having an objective outsider can really make a difference. Some kind of mentor you could team them up with. It could be a therapist. It could be just a coach. It could be someone who would help out with your performance. That could be a teacher. It could be a fellow performer. Someone else that you as an adult that you perform with that can help talk about the reality situation. There's it could be a group that gets together and talks about it. So I definitely think that's a really excellent point, Marty. That
okay. But also this harsh evaluation, I think, has a lot to do with coaches as well. I mean, I think at the end of the game, if the coach is the one beating up on the kids about how they performed, that undermines everything that, the parent or the mentor might try and do as well. Because it's about winning for them as well.
Yes. Well, there is a whole part of performance anxiety, which I think go into, that revolves around working with coaches. Coaches can be a major source of stress for the individuals that they work with, and in performing arts directors and other performance leaders can really be very harsh, very critical, because they want the excellent performance. And oftentimes, even with youth performance, I mean, it's very important that coaches pay attention to how they talk to their teams, and to use positive statements, and to not let all their frustration out on the performers. It's particularly with the youth performers, in the recreational sports and high school sports and in those areas as well. But you're definitely right, Marty.
Okay, I had a question about migraine, and it was a question as to whether or not migraines can be triggered by anxiety. And this teacher is saying that they occur in a student roughly around the same time each day. And I understand there are a lot of components to migraine, but would you give us some thoughts on that?
Well, that's not my area of specialty as far as the inner workings of a migraine, but it is known that stress can cause migraine. But that's not an area I could really comment more on.
Okay,
refer you
that's
to
fine.
a neurologist or physician.
All right. Would you recommend a movement type of activity prior to tasks, which particularly standardized tests that would be, stress relieving, or things that you could do in a classroom that, won't disrupt the classroom, but would be something that the kids could loosen up with, for example?
Oh, definitely. I'm assuming a teacher was asking that question.
Yes.
There are a lot of stress-relieving activities you can do with your class. First and foremost, pay attention to your own behaviors in the class and how stressed you are. Come in with a positive attitude and try to be as relaxed as possible, even though it is a stressful day. But you could definitely lead your class through. You could lead your class through some guided relaxation activities, like we discussed before. As a teacher, you can get an audio recording. You could probably talk to a counselor in your school. They might have it in their office, or you can download something off iTunes and say, okay, kids, we're going to go through an exercise. We're going to relax. And you can do that with your class as long as your principal is okay with it. You could do some basic physical, movement and stretching activities that could be relaxing for the class in a way. Not overstimulating, but something that would, maybe some general stretching, as long as, like I said, it's approved by the administrators before you do this. But And other positive activities that can really lighten the mood in the class can be helpful. On the day of a test, I think a lot of teachers do this anyway, but just lighten the mood. Have an activity before testing that kind of gets kids, a little bit just laughing or just off their, taking their worries away for a couple minutes could be helpful. Just setting the tone of the class. But there are definitely some relaxation activities you can run with the whole class, and we've done that before in the schools I've worked in.
All right. We've got time for one more question, and since we are the Tourette Association, I'm going to end with a TS question, okay?
Sure.
This is from a parent. My child used to be quite confident, but now that the TS has become more pronounced, she has some self-esteem issues. And the mom wants to encourage her to get back to the things she enjoys. So any suggestions around that? And that's not just about TS. I mean, it could relate to OCD or to ADHD for that matter. But how do you, rebuild someone's confidence when they're facing something like this?
Confidence, was she talking about a performance activity or just
Yes.
confidence in general?
Yeah, because she used to be, she used to have more confidence and more self-esteem, and all of that's changed. So, yes. How
Okay.
would you encourage someone like that?
What I would encourage someone to continue to perform. And if they're not confident, if they're feeling uneasy with, being anxious, especially if they're going to worried about ticking or being distracted in performance, first of all, making sure that you're getting some kind of treatment for that and taking care of all the other, to performer as a person areas that you can before the performance. But it's important to try to get out there and perform. One of if it's really severe and they have no motivation, and it's very hard to get them, activated and out there performing and doing what they want to do, I definitely would seek professional help if you think that there's some depression going on or they're really lack of motivation to help get them motivated. But the key is trying to get them out there doing something. So you might want to just really encourage her and find some gradual way to get them back performing. So maybe they don't want to do the same activity. I'm talking very generally, but let's say if it's an athlete, they don't want to play soccer with the team, have them go to a park and play soccer with them for a little bit and then work on that. The other area is if it's really have to see why they're losing motivation and what the reasons are behind that. Is it because they're of the tics? Is there embarrassment? Is there confusion? Is there just a lack of confidence that they can't perform anymore because of the tics? Really have to find out the nature. So it's tough to answer that question more specifically without knowing. But,
okay, but I think that's the right track. And sometimes I think kids competing on teams, if they switched and I don't know, started doing something where they were competing against themselves more, like running, for example, where you're against your own time, might relieve some of that as well, versus trying to make the perfect catch or the perfect kick or something.
Yeah,
as part of a team.
Exactly, and if the tics are really interfering with an area of performance you're doing before that it really makes it difficult to do, like you just said, Marty, you could just change the performance activity to something else they can do that would be help boost their confidence and find other activities and avenues for them to grow.
To pursue.
And for some people, working in a team might be helpful if they're used to working individually, working with others who are they know a little about the tics, they're accepting of it. The group dynamic could help someone, want to perform. They feel part of the group, they want to get involved. So that could be important as well.
All right, then I'm going to end with that. Dr. Hartke, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you for joining our webinar on anxiety and its impact on sports, academics, and performance, understanding the mental and emotional side of performance. There is an exit survey which will show on your screen as you exit. Please fill out the evaluation on the exit survey. The discussion board will be open tomorrow and available for the next 7 days on the NJCTS website for any additional questions that were not covered in tonight's presentation. That website is www.njcts.org. Also, an archive recording of tonight's webinar will be posted to the website. Our next presentation, Do You or Your Child Seem Disorganized? How to Recognize Executive Dysfunction and What Can Be Done, is scheduled for May 4th and is going to be presented by Dr. Kenneth Schneider. This ends tonight's webinar. Thank you, Dr. Hartke, for your presentation, and thank you, everyone, for attending. Good night.